today's edition of Pegasus Test. On today's edition, we're reviewing the gear of Desert Brutality 2019. For Desert Brutality 2019, I shot in the Classic Division. Now, first up, let me make one thing clear. In Classic Division, your weapons all had to be pre-86. The M16A2 technically is pre-1986, although it didn't have adoption until later in the 80s. It was definitely invented before 86. Same with the M9 pistol, as it was adopted in 1985. Now, that was the requirements of the division. Another requirement was you had to use the proper magazines of the time. So that meant aluminum GI magazines for the rifle, 15-round capacity magazines for the pistol. Now, we know in the modern day you can get PMags, which work a whole lot better. And if you've been watching the series, you can see the magazines gave me endless amounts of trouble during this event. The pistol magazines were actual Checkmate Parkerized issue M9 magazines. You can buy a lot better today. Matter of fact, you should be buying Metcar magazines for your M9 if you run one. Now, the rest of this getup was not required by the division. I did it in the spirit of Classic. This is my issue gear from Desert Storm. I wore this gear in 1990, 1991, overseas deployed during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I wore it again just for the spirit of the competition. First piece of gear we're going to review is my rifle. It's an AR-15. It's in the M16A2 configuration, as close as I can legally have it, which means I have no 3-round burst control. The only other deviations on this rifle from an as-issued rifle are right here, the muzzle device. As you can see, that is a closed-off, basically a muzzle cap. And that's because I got this rifle right after the 1994 assault weapons ban was enacted, so that was required. I couldn't have a real birdcage A2 flash hider on it. Although I have to say, over the years, lack of one hasn't been a problem, and this also allows me to go visit and shoot with friends in states that are not permissive, like the People's Republic of New Jersey or the Democratic People's Republic of Connecticut, for example. Also, another deviation of the rifle is right here, the bayonet lug. Looks like it has one, but it really doesn't. The little nubs here have been ground off, and therefore no bayonet will mount or lock onto the rifle. Other than that, this is an as-issued GI M16A2 rifle. Another part about this rifle that's actually as-issued is the sling. And in the modern day, this is really just a carrying strap, not a sling. This, however, is my actual sling from my rifle I carried over there. So I took authenticity as far as I could. The next weapon used was my pistol, which was an M9. Now, this is I'm calling it an M9. It's really a Beretta 92, as being the only difference is the sights. As you well know, on a issue M9, it's a dot in the front and a post in the back. Beretta 92 only has 3-dot sights. Now, you'll notice the 3-dot sights here are pretty rough. The front one's almost gone, the backs are pretty faded, so it's essentially just conventional iron sight pistol at this point. I've had this pistol a very long time, got this as soon as I got back from the desert, so it's got a lot of rounds through it, it's got a lot of use on it, and it's a great pistol. Now, you'll notice I'm wearing an M7 shoulder holster. This was my issue holster for this pistol in Desert Storm. Assigned to a heavy helicopter squadron in the United States Marine Corps, all flight crew, of which I was a member, were assigned a pistol. The holsters we were given were M7 holsters. We did not use the M12 flap holster, although we were able to acquire some. This holster was very adaptable. I used it for most of my needs, and I'm going to go over the adaptability here as we go on in the video. Now, you just saw me wearing the pistol in my flak jacket with my 782 gear on. However, a lot of times, moving around base over there in Saudi Arabia at Al Jubail, Tanajib, Lonesome Dove, Mishab, and a few other places, when you were in what's considered secure area, you just wore the pistol like this, as intended, without your gear on. Of course, you always had this frickin' colostomy bag on your pro mask because you never know when Saddam's going to launch a missile full of sarin gas. Thankfully, he never did. However, you had to have this thing on you at all times. The other thing you had to have on you at all times was a weapon. So the holster, as you can see, fits perfectly as compared to the flopping around you see it doing with the flak jacket and the other videos in the series, and there's reasons for that. it's kind of a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. The holster here is adjusted by a series of straps. First you adjust for your height of where it rides on your body, and then you adjust where it goes around your girth. Well, here's the problem. It's a leather holster with a buckle using holes, just like your pants belt. And the problem with that is it doesn't change very easy. And in the desert, the leather kind of dried out and everything, and it got brittle very quickly, and holsters were breaking very early on. So what we did is we got replacement holders. You adjusted it to what you want, and you just didn't change it. So I went with an adjustment that allowed me to wear this nice and comfortably around the base. However, when I had to put my flak jacket on, here's what I did. Voila, I just put the flak jacket over the pistol and carried it concealed. Now obviously at a shooting competition that was not going to be an option. But this is how the desert flak jacket goes on. You have your pistol and you put your 782 gear on over it. You notice I have the flak jacket open. You're like, well, it's not doing its job then. You're technically correct. You're also, you use the flak jacket you got issued. This flak jacket was too small in 1990. It was a size too small. Now it's really tight because although I can still get into my uniforms and all that stuff 30 years later, they're a little snugger than they used to be. Don't want to admit that, but that's the truth. So this is how I generally went around with my flak jacket. Open, venting too in the heat, and my pistol like this because this is how my holster was adjusted. That's how everybody did it basically. Now you see how I'm wearing the holster with the flak jacket on in the 782 gear. You'll notice the strap that should be going around my body here is just looped around the other side of my neck. And that's just because the flak jacket adds so much girth, you come up very short trying to snap it in place. But the holster flops around a little, but not as much as you would think because it's right there when you need it. And it securely retains it. That's one of the great things about this holster. The strap is very good about retaining it. There's none of the obstacles that I tackled in Desert Brutality where the pistol came out, which is good because there were penalties attached to losing your pistol. Matter of fact, originally the penalty was disqualification, but they had to amend that later on because so many people were losing it that you just took a severe time penalty for it. I don't remember exactly what it was. Thankfully, I never lost my pistol, and I was never worried about losing my pistol. Now, this is technically accurate the way I'm wearing it because, one, when the flak jacket went on, as you saw, I would wear it under it. In the competition, I couldn't do that. But when I had flight gear on, you had all your survival vest on the front of you, and this was the only way to attach your pistol, which was pretty important because in the helicopter, as part of the crew, you weren't taking a rifle with you. So you had to have your sidearm with you. All right, next piece of gear that we had that was pretty central to what I was doing was the flak jacket. Now I wore that because it was period correct. It was not a requirement of Desert Brutality. And while this is armor, it did not meet the requirements for armor because there were no hard plates. Now this flak jacket does one thing. It does protect you from artillery fragments. But that's where its protection begins and ends. Yes, you can look on YouTube. You will find videos of people shooting 9mm at it and it resists it. That's good, that's awesome, that's a bonus. Wouldn't want to be betting my life on it. The basic purpose of this vest is to protect you from fragmentation from artillery. And it's pretty good all-round protection. Okay, as you can see, the vest gives you coverage from your torso up to your neck. It has some neck protectors here. It has shoulder pads here on the sides. The camouflage covering is covering it up. There's elastic under there to hold the front and the back together, overlapped. It gives you pretty good all-around protection from artillery. The problem is it also restricts movement. On one of the pistol stages, stage 5 to be example, as I stuffed myself in the car there, this thing was so restrictive that getting my hands around to get a proper grip on the pistol was so difficult. I just decided to use my support hand to stabilize myself and took all the targets one-handed, which goes to show in your pistol training you should be practicing one-handed shooting because you don't know when it's going to come in handy. But the modern body armor, if you notice and you look at people wearing it in the modern day, it doesn't cover as much as this vest does. And that's because of the restrictions that it gives you. Also, it's not vented very well and stuff. A modern plate carrier that just basically holds the plate, some webbing on the sides and a plate on the back is giving you much more ventilation. This thing can cause you to overheat. Now, that being said, it was very nice out of Desert Brutality, because in the temperatures that we had out there in the 40s to 50s and stuff, in the morning with this thing on, I was nice, snug, and comfy. No shivering going on. So it was a double benefit. But had this been done in the summer when the temperatures are over 100, yeah, I'd have been cooking like a chicken in a slow cooker, man. The next piece of gear was my Pro mask. That's right, the M17 gas mask. I brought it with me. I wore it through the whole competition. What did it do for me other than giving authenticity? Absolutely nothing except get in the way. Which is just what it did over in Desert Shield and Desert Storm too. Fortunately, it was a necessary evil. Made an okay pillow at night, but other than that, I think it's just in the way. It takes away all your pockets on this side. It flops around. It feels like a lead weight on you. Unfortunately, your Pro mask is a necessary evil. You got to have it. There's no great way to carry it. There's no easy way to carry it. It is what it is. It's just there. This is the method I generally use to carry it. There are different ways you can carry it across your chest. You can carry it under your arm. Whatever works for you is whatever works for you. There's no right or wrong way. This is what I went with because I happen to be right-handed, so my left could open it, pull out my Pro mask, don it, and go about my business. I feel sorry for the left-handed guys because everything was reversed for them, and this carrier is not set up to be carried anyway on your left-hand side. In keeping with the spirit of Classic Division, I also wore my 782 gear. That was not a requirement of the match. I could have just easily run this whole thing with magazines in my pockets and no gear at all, and that probably would have helped on several stages, but I chose to go period correct. And this is my issue 782 gear that I had deployed overseas. One of the things you'll notice about it, it's fitting nice and snug right now because it's tailored, or it's set up to be worn like this. When the flak jacket goes on, that's where this piece of gear comes in handy. It's called a Kovac clip. They don't make them anymore because the GI issue belts come with a different buckling system. I'm sure somebody makes them in the way that it does fit. But this is handy because when you have the gear configured to fit like this, you put on your flak jacket, you put on your field jacket, all of a sudden it doesn't fit. You can't get the buckle to come. This, snap it in, and it extends the girth. And with the flak jacket on, as you saw during the thing, it all of a sudden fit just right. And just your gears just fit around the flak jacket, or if you had a field jacket on. Another good thing about this is when you're carrying a rock, because you put the clip in, slide everything back a little bit, and then all of a sudden your pack fits on better, and back here there's room for the pad to sit on top of your gear, because a lot of times without the clip, when your gear's up here, it's right where the pad of the pack wants to be, and it doesn't ride very well at all. Anyhow, so this is a handy piece of gear. You can still find them in surplus stores, and I always recommend having them. That way, when you have your gear set for summer, it's great. You want to go train in the winter, put on your heavy winter clothing, field jacket and all that, throw the clip on, and then you're good to go, and you don't have to do any major readjustments of your gear. And there you have it, laid out, my 782 gear. I am a big fan of Alice gear. It's good, strong gear. It's well made, most of it, if you're getting stuff that's made mil-spec, not the cheap Korean knockoffs. It can be configured for just about any mission you can come up with. So that it's got versatility down pat. It's fairly comfortable to wear, as long as it's not burdened down with too much stuff. But let's go over this because this is, for the most part, in the configuration I wore it overseas. And this is exactly how I wore it during Desert Brutality. Starting from the middle and working outbound, we'll just go to one side because the two sides mirror each other. You have a GI medical kit here. Now this is one that was issued mainly to the Marine Corps. As far as I know, Army guys didn't get this issued. It's got your field dressings, bandages, a couple small pill bottles if the docs issue you some meds. So you can handle anything up to a sucking chest wound or as small as a minor cut that just needs a Band-Aid. That being said, if you'll notice in the modern day, modern IFAKs are a whole lot bigger and they have a whole lot more stuff in them. And that comes from the reason we've learned a lot since these type of kits were issued. And You know, one of the big things we learned is tourniquets. We didn't have one there. We were always taught tourniquets were a last resort. Now they seem to be almost a go-to thing. Moving on, we have the canteens. I did run these canteens full the whole time. I did use them while I was out there, but they were topped off each night. Hydration is important, especially in the desert. And you have the GI issue mag pouches. This is an underappreciated piece of gear if there ever was one. The detriment of the GI mag pouch is it's not very good for quick reloads. If you notice on, say, Stage 8, Stage 1 videos, my reloads are slow, and that's dictated by the pouches. They're not easy to get into, particularly this one, because you have a pinch clip, and then you have individual flaps for each of the magazines. So that made it a little bit difficult or to have a speedy reload. But other than that, the wonder of the GI issue pouches is it does very good at what it's supposed to do, which is retain your magazines. Because when you're moving in formations of fire teams that are part of squads, that are part of platoons, that are doing company movements in support of battalion objectives, the fast reload, like you see in a competition, isn't so much because you have your buddies covering you. So not losing your ammo is way more important than a speedy reload. The next thing you have here is the M9 pistol pouch. This is the biggest deviation in gear that I had made because in Desert Storm we didn't have these pouches. That doesn't mean they didn't exist, it means we didn't have them in my squadron. We actually had to have our flight equipment guys make us magazine pouches, which I would have used, but the Velcro has long since died on those. So I went out and got some GI issue mag pouches. And the reason we didn't have them when we were over there is we came off deployment. A few days later, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and we were packing up to go right back out. We switched out our 1911s for our M9s, and part of what we didn't get was magazine pouches. Didn't get magazines either, but that's a story for another time. Anyhow, that's it. That's in a nutshell. That is the 782 gear I used at Desert Brutality and also in Desert Storm. And there you have it. That's the firearms and gear used in Desert Brutality 2019. As I said, being in Classic Division, all this extra gear wasn't required, but I did it for the spirit of the division and to see how it would perform in a match environment. What are my conclusions? Well, the modern slings like the Blue Force or the Viking Tactics sling is way better than essentially what is the carry strap that we were given for the rifle. If given a choice, I would definitely switch up to that. There's no reason to keep using old GI slings. The GI M7 holster actually works. It still performs its function. Would it be better if there was an equivalent in modern ballistic nylon? Yes, absolutely. But it works. It fulfills its function. It keeps the pistol handy and it retains the pistol. You can't ask for anything more. Going with the flak jacket and the Pro Mask, those were definitely lead anchors around what I was doing. They didn't do anything to help time, and they definitely, you could say, had an effect against it by how it affected mobility. Now that being said, while it had an impact on me, it didn't have nearly the impact on me that having a nasty case of bronchitis and a bunch of other viruses seem to have had. However, it does have an effect. 782 gear. This is good stuff for going into battle with. It performs its function well, and I have stated several times in other videos, and I'll state it again. When you go period for period, we learned our lessons from the First World War and the Second World War on. US 782 web gear, TA-50, whatever you want to call it, is always superior to anybody else's. And a proof of that is if you look at period pictures where U.S. forces are working in tandem with other forces, you'll see those other forces having bits and pieces of U.S. kit on them. You don't see U.S. forces with bits and pieces of British or German or whoever else's gear incorporated into what they're doing. That doesn't happen. It's because this is good gear. That being said, it's not good gear for competition. As I elaborated on earlier, the magazine pouches, great at retaining magazines, not so quick on the reload, to be honest. Canteens, while being nice and you should always be hydrating yourself, a hydration pack is better, especially in a competition environment. That being said, you can definitely run a competition with this stuff, and I think everybody should try it at least once for the experience. Shooting Desert Brutality in Classic Division was a blast. I'm glad I did it. I'm also very glad I did it in period correct equipment as well. It wasn't a requirement, but it enhanced the experience greatly. I'd encourage everybody to give it a try in Classic. It's a great test of skills. And if you do shoot Classic, go ahead and get some Classic gear. Have fun. This is cosplay with guns. Why wouldn't you want to do that? We hope you enjoyed our coverage of the Desert Brutality 2019 event. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for future shooting experiences.